So as Chief Development Officer, I oversee a number of divisions that are designed to support the growth and development of the city. So that includes planning and regulatory services, so all of our boards and commissions that deal with the land use of the city, Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, Historic Commission, Conservation Commission, as well as the License Commission. But we also have divisions related to business development, housing development that really focuses on affordable housing options in the city, neighborhood development, working with our community-based organizations that benefit a number of residents in certain areas of the city. And we also have a special projects division that does some of the more kind of changing projects time to time. A good example of that might be Polar Park or the development of Union Station.
Can you tell me a little bit about Polar Park? Did you play a part in that?
Yes, so with Polar Park, our office was involved in a few ways. So I became Chief Development Officer in May of 2020, which was during the construction process, but supported some of it in my previous role with the department. But our office played a significant role in that because as Chief Development Officer for the City of Worcester, I also serve as the Chief Executive Officer for the Worcester Redevelopment Authority. And the Worcester Redevelopment Authority is one of our boards and commissions in the city. And it's its own sort of legal entity that is very much affiliated with the City of Worcester and relies on the City of Worcester for its financials. But the Redevelopment Authority is actually the entity that acquired the land and then oversaw the construction of Polar Park and then did the lease agreement with the Worcester Red Sox and has been also working with the surrounding development that's been going on around Polar Park.
Walk me through a typical day in your life.
One thing that's exciting about the job is that every day is different. So there are definitely lots of meetings, going out and connecting with various members of the community, residents, business owners, developers, investors, other city departments, coordinating our efforts. Because when you think about the development of the city, we don't do that in a vacuum in our department. We work closely with inspectional services and DPW, Health and Human Services, and a lot of community-based partners as well. So a lot of my day-to-day is filled with many meetings, but also advancing a lot of the particular initiatives or projects that we have going on in a given week, month, or year. So obviously there's a lot of paperwork that tends to be involved with advancing kind of projects and initiatives to the next level and communicating updates and reports to the City Council as well, so preparing those communications and reports to the City Council. But that's one of the exciting things about the job is that every day is different.
And is it a lot?
There's a lot going on, yeah. So it's an interesting time in Worcester's history, I think, and trying to balance that growth in a way that helps us, move the city forward, but doing so in a way that really benefits our residents and business owners that are here. And our staff, our department is a full-time staff of about 42 people. So the whole managerial aspect of it and personnel and working with our division leaders to make sure that everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction and moving the city forward. So there's a lot involved for sure.
You're dealing with a lot, but that's only because you're in this position. What I want to know about, right, since you have made it this far in your career, I want to know about your beginning. Sort of what inspired you to go down this path?
It's a good question. I didn't necessarily think that I would be in public service working for local government. My background, when I went to school in my undergraduate, I studied management, economics, and Spanish. And then I did an MBA part-time while I was working for the city. But during my undergraduate career, I did a couple of internships during the intersession, summer and winter, both for the Worcester Business Development Corporation and then for the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce. And those internships are what really kind of exposed me to this industry of economic development. And there are different roles and organizations that play into economic development. Both of those organizations are nonprofits. So sometimes in this industry, there's a number of different kind of institutions or organizations that could create career pathways. So that could be local government and kind of the role that I have now, nonprofit, but also the private sector and the for-profit industry too, developers, investors, and things like that. So I didn't necessarily know that I would become a member of local government, but it's been very rewarding. So I've enjoyed it very much. So pretty shortly out of college is when I first started in the department, started in the business development division, which really related to my academic experience. I was studying business and economics, and so working with the small business community, working with aspiring business owners, entrepreneurs that are looking to figure out how do they get started, in what ways might they be interacting with the city government. So that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that role, and then just kind of through the time that I've had here, I just kind of took on more responsibility, different kind of roles in the department until, coming to the role that I have today as Chief Development Officer.
What type of advice do you give to those small businesses or entrepreneurs in the Worcester scene? Like how you help them exactly?
Yeah, so we have I'd say that in Worcester we have this entrepreneurial ecosystem that exists, and we play a particular role with that as local government, and that is the advice or the assistance we give is often on how their business might interact with local government and how local government could support their business. But I think one of the important first steps that we work with our other partners in this entrepreneurial ecosystem is the business planning process. So we just don't have a lot of capacity to sit down with entrepreneurs and go through the business plan and help them develop the business plan, be thinking about what's your business model, how do you drive revenue, what are some of your differentiators, or what's your kind of competitive advantage in that industry that they might be starting their business in. But that's always a really important first step. So we developed a 10-step guide to starting a business, and some of it includes some referrals to other organizations in the city, like the Center for Women in Enterprise, the Small Business Development Center at Clark University, Entrepreneurship for All, E4All, which is a fairly new organization that's been around for a few years now. SCORE Mentors, which is sort of a division of the Small Business Administration at the federal level, the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce. So there's a number of partners that we rely on and work with for folks on different aspects of that startup process. But I think what's most important first is the planning process. And then once an entrepreneur feels like they have a viable plan to move forward, that's where we can come in to say, here's how you would register your business. Are you doing sole proprietorship or an LLC or a corporation? Do you need a physical space in the city? So are you looking for office space, or is it more like a retail, where you need a storefront kind of environment? Any kinds of licenses or permits that you might need from the city. So that's where we play a particular role, is helping folks navigate that process of how their business will interact with local government. And then we also have some financial assistance programs as well. So, microloans, small business grants for businesses that will be occupying vacant space. We have a lot of, vacant storefronts in some of our commercial districts where we know the challenges that retail is faced with, threats from Amazon and Walmart, e-commerce, all of that. And so we really want to continue to support that retail, Main Street type environment of small businesses. And so we have a small business grant program that can help them with, equipment related expenditures as they're getting into a storefront that might have been vacant for a while. So we also have some financial assistance programs that can help new businesses kind of get started and hopefully position them for success.
What are some of the things you've accomplished so far that you're the proudest of?
Yeah, so some of what we've accomplished that I'm most proud of, I would say, is really improving the city's quality of life overall. So there's a lot of different things that we do that kind of relate to quality of life in the city. And I think we're seeing the success of that because of the population growth in the city. So from 2010, the census in 2010 to the census in 2020, our city grew 14%, over 20,000 residents, to the highest population in the city's 300-year history. And that growth rate in the last 10 years was a larger growth rate than Boston, Providence, Hartford, Manchester, Portland, Maine. So it really shows that people are voting with their feet and choosing Worcester as like, this is the place we want to live, work, play, raise a family, go to school. And so I think that is kind of like the outcome that shows that there's been a lot of success because people want to be here. start their business here, raise their family here, live here. So that's kind of like the outcome that I think is pretty rewarding. And one of the things that we've focused on in that time frame that has been successful has been housing development. So obviously when people want to live here, we need to actually have places for them to live. So I don't think we would have achieved that kind of population growth rate if we weren't also developing housing in the city. So that's been, I think, a particular accomplishment that we're proud of, especially when we think of the housing crisis that's going on across the Commonwealth and really nationwide, which the root of that has been an underproduction of housing for really decades. Just yesterday, the governor was in Worcester touring an affordable housing project in Maine South, and they estimate that just based on today's needs, not 10 years from now or in the future, just today's needs, the Commonwealth has a shortage of about 200,000 units of housing. So that just shows over the last decade, more than a decade, that we just haven't been producing as a Commonwealth the amount of housing that's necessary to meet the needs of our state. But as we've seen again with Worcester growing 14% over the last 10 years, which is more than essentially every other community in Massachusetts, that we've been doing our part, playing our role to make sure that we're creating the housing that's needed for our community, not only here in the city, but really across the Commonwealth.
In an interview with Worcester Business Journal back in 2016, you talked about wanting to emulate Robert Kraft. Could you elaborate on his influence on you?
Back in 2016, I think that was when they did the 40 Under 40 awards, and I was selected as one of those recipients. And they had asked about a business leader that you kind of look fondly of or aspire to. And one of the things about Robert Kraft is just his deep commitment to community and service, and the breadth of what he's accomplished, where it's a lot of people obviously know him and the Kraft family because of the Patriots, but they have a whole portfolio of companies that they've started, grown, and really been very successful with. And so I think that diversity of all that they've been able to accomplish is something that's definitely very impressive. But again, just kind of that deep-rooted community service that guides them as well. You look at during the pandemic where they took their airplane and brought in masks and personal protective equipment and donated all of that to their communities. I think that's just one thing that really sets some business leaders apart, or those that continue to share their success with the communities they serve is really important.
You also mentioned in that same interview that you surround yourself with like-minded people. What are the benefits of surrounding yourself with like-minded or determined people?
I think when you surround yourself with like-minded people, especially those that are really kind of focused and driven, I think it just leads to your success, right? I use an analogy. So I'm a golfer. I play golf, and one of the best things golfers can do for themselves is play with other golfers that are better than them, because it just allows you to almost kind of elevate yourself. You see what they do well, you kind of take some of those things and incorporate it into your game. And I think that analogy is good for your professional experience as well, because when you surround yourself with folks that are successful and driven and effective leaders, you end up kind of observing that and absorbing that into kind of how you approach your work and how you approach your kind of role as a leader. And so that has been true for me. I've learned a lot from the two city managers now that I've worked for, and just being around them, seeing how they handle situations, work with the community, and really drive the city forward and really lead the workforce that we have here. I think that's really helpful in taking those things in, absorbing that through those observations, and kind of taking that forward in my experience and in the leadership role that I serve now.
We've seen a lot of development in Worcester. What are your plans to continue that development and growth?
We have had some great success over the last 10 or so years in development in Worcester, but we are experiencing some macroeconomic challenges right now. Obviously the cost of everything, inflation has had impacts across all sectors, including construction costs, which is important when you think of development of the city. So inflation, as well as now rising interest rates, which we obviously have no control over, does make it harder, really across the board. I mean, when you see rising interest rates, it makes the cost of capital more expensive for businesses that are trying to grow or start, as you need, some loans to get started or to support that expansion. On the housing side of things, certainly like construction loans and the mortgage financing for development of housing becomes more expensive. But even for homeowners, anybody that's tried to purchase a home in the last year that is now maybe having a mortgage interest rate of 6 or 7% compared with 3 or 4%, that really affects that monthly payment and the ability for our residents to really achieve that dream of owning a home. And so those factors like interest rates and costs, inflation are certainly out of our control, but we try to manage our way through those headwinds that we're seeing to continue that growth and development. And so we're doing that every day, whether it's programs or trying to work with our state and federal partners to continue that momentum. But one of the things that we're also focused on now too, as the city has grown pretty substantially over the last 10 years, is how are we doing that in a way that's sustainable, and how are we doing that in a way that's also inclusive of folks that are here now. And so one great example of that would be our initiative around inclusionary zoning. So inclusionary zoning is a big topic. It can get fairly complicated, and it's not the same in every community. It can look very different in different communities, but the basic fundamentals of inclusionary zoning is that all new multifamily of a certain size has to keep a set aside of a certain number of units that are restricted for affordable rental rates. So as we've grown and we've seen a good amount of market rate type development, unrestricted units, whatever the market will bear for the rent of those units, we've needed that, and that's been good to see. But we also want to now balance that out in a way that we're growing the affordable housing in a proportional way to the market rate housing that we're seeing in the city. And so that is, I think, in essence, why we move forward with an inclusionary zoning initiative. And that's just one example of many that we're trying to, grow in a way that's kind of smart, sustainable, and really is mitigating potential effects of gentrification.
Has the economy slowed Worcester's development growth at all?
Those factors like the macroeconomics in terms of inflation and interest rates, I think has had an impact already, slowing the growth that we would have seen otherwise. I think it's good to see that we are continuing that momentum and continuing a number of developments in the city and that growth, but I think that growth would be even more robust and accelerated if we weren't dealing with some of those challenges right now. We have seen some projects, one example being 340 Main Street, the Commerce Building downtown was proposed to be converted from an office building that was largely vacant, especially during COVID. So late 2020 is when this idea, the proposal came forward to convert that office building into residential units downtown, which would be great to again add that density, that vitality of more people living downtown, and those would be new customers for the small businesses that have been struggling on Main Street. But that project should have been almost done by now, certainly under construction by now, and they took a pause on that project because of the cost environment. Both inflation and interest rates have made that project much more challenging to continue, and so that project is one example of some that is on hold for the time being until the conditions kind of settle and the environment is more conducive for that project to move forward.
What does the Worcester community have that makes it so strong and keeps surviving all these years?
Two things, I think, in terms of what makes Worcester unique and strong. I think starting with just what it is that makes us unique or a great place to be. Certainly, we talk about our diversity. There are many different cultures. You look at the Worcester Public Schools where 90 to 100 different native languages are spoken by our students in the Worcester Public Schools. Really a microcosm of the melting pot that is the United States in terms of economic opportunity and quality of life for folks from all over the globe searching for that opportunity. We've always been a welcoming community in that sense. We've had different, sort of waves of immigration as the years have passed by. But I think one thing that's always remained true is that we've been a very welcoming community. And the other piece about Worcester in terms of what makes us unique, some folks have described us sort of as like a Goldilocks city where we're just the right size. We're not as big as like a Boston or some of these capital cities where it's so big that people get lost in it. But at the same time, we also have all of the amenities and colleges and institutions that people want out of like an urban lifestyle. So you have 8 colleges and universities, arts and culture institutions like the Hanover Theater, Worcester Art Museum, Convention Center and Arena and the DCU Center, now with Polar Park, other smaller community-based organizations, over 60 public parks, world-renowned high schools. The Worcester Technical High School received the Blue Ribbon Award, and President Obama spoke at their graduation in 2014. And now we've continued with that investment, building south, and now Doherty being under construction. So great education as well. So we have all of the kind of amenities and experiences folks want out of a more urban kind of center, but it's not so big like a Boston where you can get lost in all of that, where we're small enough where everybody seems to be 2 to 3 degrees of separation, and you can really, it's very accessible. You can meet with your public officials, you can get a meeting with the city manager or members of his cabinet, you can get a meeting with our mayor and the city councilors. So it's small enough where it continues to be accessible and people can actually affect change. You have a good idea, you can get that going. A great example of that would be the Pow Wow Mural Festival. So that was, grassroots organization, a handful of community members that really wanted to beautify the city, see more public art in the city. And just with that idea and some good energy, they were able to make those connections, get the various approvals and endorsement of the city to move forward with that festival and that initiative. And so that's just one example of many where you can get things done and it's accessible in the way that you can get to decision makers and business leaders. So we often kind of describe it as like that Goldilocks city where it's like just the right size. It's not too small, not too big. But the other piece that I think has made us successful and strong through various macroeconomic cycles of recessions and whatnot is our educational and medical foundation in terms of our economy. Some people characterize it as eds and meds. And so when you look at the colleges and universities, the public schools, the private schools that we have here, as well as the hospitals, the other healthcare companies, like a Reliant Medical where they don't own a hospital, but huge employer in the city in terms of healthcare. And now with biotechnology and life sciences, emerging companies that might be in incubators at the Mass Biomedical Initiatives or in the biotech park across from UMass Medical School. There's a lot of industry and companies that are employing people and really discovering, new therapies and various treatments for folks that are saving lives. And so those two sectors of education and life sciences and healthcare are very stable industries. People are still getting sick, people still need to take care of themselves. So when you have these macroeconomic cycles and these recessions, those industries tend to be a little bit more resilient than maybe some other industries that are more susceptible to recessions. And so I think that foundation where our largest employers are in education and healthcare, I think have given us that solid strength and foundation to really weather these recessions as they come.
A lot of people have hobbies, side ventures, side hustles. In your free time, what do you do outside of being a chief development officer?
In my free time, I definitely spend a lot of time with friends and family. But in terms of my avocation, what I probably spend the most time doing would be golf. Definitely, yeah. I'm definitely a big golfer. So that's always been my passion. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I also do various, service work, volunteer work. I serve on a few different boards of nonprofit organizations, and those change, as you kind of cycle out and get involved in different ways. Currently, I serve on the Alumni Association for Roger Williams University, which is where I did my undergraduate in Rhode Island, so that's been rewarding to give back in that way. But certainly always stay busy with all the comings and goings and activities with friends and family for sure.
What legacy do you want to leave behind?
In terms of a legacy, I don't know if I haven't really thought about that before. I don't usually think about my work in that kind of way. But I've been here for 10 years now, so you kind of start to get into that maybe space when you have that kind of level of tenure and that impact over such a long period of time. I really think that if we just continue to make the lives of our residents better, if we continue to make doing business in the city easier, more successful for those business owners in the city, I mean, that's really at the end of the day why we're here. Really trying to make sure that we have great economic opportunities, quality of life for both residents and business owners is at the end of the day why we do what we do.